I know, this is why we do
Yeah,
this.
it's really every single time I'm always like, how's it gonna go? And then every single time they leave and I'm like, oh my God, just right back in it. I'm right back in it.
Yeah, me too. It's just like what I
It
need to
really
do.
is. It's like going to a sermon. That's what it is for me. It's like going to a spiritual speaker and you just like sit there and you drink it all in and then you're like, yep, okay, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna live that again.
Parenting's hard, you don't know what to do. You're blaming your kids, but it's probably you. You love your kids and that you can trust. Just remember your kids don't suck.
Welcome to Your Kids Don't Suck, cultivating closeness with your children through non-coercive conscious parenting. We're your hosts, Kara Tedstone and Rathia Lee. Let's dive in and grow together.
Welcome back to Your Kids Don't Suck. I hope you are returning from many episodes from before and you're just tied in. But if you're new here, this is a great time to start. This is Rathia talking, and this is Kara, my co-host.
Hello.
Today we have a special guest, and her name is Leslie Priscilla. Her business is called Latinx Parenting. Leslie Priscilla is a first-generation queer, neurodivergent, non-Black Chicana, child of Mexican immigrants with Ramuri lineage. She is a mother to 3 biracial children and a certified parent coach with over 16 years of experience. Leslie shares her medicine by offering coaching, workshops, support and advocacy for Latinx, Chicanx families locally, nationally, and internationally via Latinx Parenting. Leslie's vision is of a movement rooted in children's rights, social and racial justice, the individual and collective practice of nonviolent and reparenting, intergenerational and ancestral healing, cultural sustenance, and the active decolonization of oppressive practices in our families towards liberation.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. Really grateful.
This episode is about non-coercive collaborative parenting, although there's so much involved in that, politically, personally. And so maybe you could just give us a context of where you're coming from. What are you up to?
I most immediately, I'm a mama, right? I have 3 kids. I have a 13-year-old, so I'm entering a parenting teenagers stage, which is makes up a lot of my life currently. And then also a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. So I think first and foremost, like I identify as their mama. Like that's just who I am. And I'm also the daughter of 2 Mexican immigrants. I think that that really shapes like who I am and what the trajectory of my work has been. And I run this organization called Latinx Parenting that I founded in 2018 out of what I felt was great need in the Latino community to have conversations about family dynamics, to talk about some of the things that we need to work on as a collective in terms of healing our lineages and making sure that we can develop better relationships with our children. And so I talk a lot about like, chancla culture, what I call chancla culture, which is this normalization of using like a sandal to whack your children, to like throw at your children in Latino culture. If you're not from Latino culture, like you might not know what that is or like where that comes from. But I feel like people who might listen to this who like come from Mexican or Latino backgrounds will definitely know La Chancla. So, I come from a lot of different stories that again have shaped the trajectory of my work. And my work is really with parents of the global majority, just people of the global majority who have had to really cope with like the impacts of colonization on their lineages, right? And some of the adaptations that we have had to make as a result of these historical consequences. And it's beautiful because we get to celebrate that we're still here. Like we get to organize also and figure out like how to get our needs met, right? By not only each other and ourselves, but like by institutions and governments and kind of like reclaim that. So, but like I really feel like there's so much work for all of us to be doing. And I'm doing my best to kind of do as much of that as I can.
Wow. So you coach parents and families.
Yeah, I mostly run groups. So I will do what I call a círculo. for a group of parents. Last week, I was up in Northern California running a space for about 32 parents who are a part of this college called Galvin College, which is a Hispanic serving institution. So a lot of my work is being able to go out and meet different communities around the country and kind of just have the conversations that I know how to facilitate around inner child work and um, around some of our family dynamics. And people get very brave and very courageous in sharing their stories. And I just love to be able to kind of witness them experience that and then thereby be able to be in better relationship with their kids, right? Because a lot of the reason that we're not able to be in relationship with our kids is because so many of us are really coping the lack of support that exists for, I think, all parents, but definitely parents of marginalized communities like Black families and Latino families kind of encounter that in a different way.
So is it just you?
No, it's not just me. I founded it and I ran it with me kind of being the primary facilitator. And I've pulled in guest facilitators. When COVID hit, everything went virtual. Before that, I was just running in person. Like every 6 weeks, I would run a series in a space. And then when COVID hit, I went online like so much more. And that was 2020, which was the racial reckoning, that we all remember really well, I hope. And that was really where, I hadn't shied away from the conversations around race and racism up to that point. And so it was very easy for me, kind of like, when we talk about liberation in Palestine and things like that, I'm like, oh, these are things that I've been wanting to talk about. So that, garnered a lot of attention, I think, because I was one of the only parenting coaches that was talking about white supremacy and racism. And after that, I needed more support. And so I started pulling in friends of mine and community members to help me either by guest facilitating workshops online, started securing some partnerships with organizations to do speaking engagements or workshops, and then slowly kind of started adding to my team. And now my partner, Fernando, is a facilitator for Latinx Parenting, which is exciting. He's actually doing a lot of the work with men and fathers. And he's building out a component around working with the youth because his background is as an educator. He was a middle school educator for years, and he was an organizer as well at that same time. And so he's bringing in a lot of the organizing and the youth education and fatherhood stuff. And so it's not me by myself. I don't know that I would be able to do anything by myself, really. I'm only who I am because of the people that are around me supporting me. And I have 2 other people on my team who are amazing.
Oh, it's so beautiful how it's all flowing,
Yeah.
What is the parenting perspective that you bring to families?
Oh, well, I was trained in a framework called trauma-informed nonviolent parenting, or nonviolent child raising. At that time, it was child raising. And it was founded by, or it was created by a woman. Her name is Ruth Beaglehole. She's 82 years old right now, and I'm still in contact with her. And she's still very much my teacher in the philosophy, and she calls me out when I'm out of line, when some things. She attends my workshops and then she criticizes me. Oh, and she does it with so much love. And she's like, I think this could, she's still coaching me. But I found her when very early on in my own parenting journey. And I was so grateful that I did because her philosophy is around nonviolent communication, which states that all behavior is a strategy to meet a need. And so I find myself saying this like a million times a day. Sometimes when I'm doing the work, it's like, we have to remember that at the root of every behavior is a need that is seeking to be met, right? And so whether we know what the need is, can identify it, have vocabulary around it, whether it's a perceived met or unmet need, right? Because sometimes I think about like billionaires, for example, and it's like their need is for security, but the perception that they don't already have that need met for themselves is false, right? So because that's false, that generates, all of these complex experiences within us around, how our thought processes and our emotions and the sensations that happen. And then that together with those unmet needs turn into these like horrible behaviors, right? That we see billionaires engaging in, and also toddlers, and also people of all ages, right? And so it's parenting specific, but it's also just human, right? Like that's just humans in general. And so I've also pulled in a lot of Indigenous perspective and Indigenous framework that I've learned from my own Indigenous lineage, which is the Raramuri people of Central Chihuahua in Mexico. But I've also been trained in like Mexica traditions, which people generally know it as like Aztec spiritual traditions. And so I've woven a lot of my learnings, the inner child work, right? So when you're like, what is it? Like, what do you do? And I'm like, it's really just an integration of all of these beautiful teachings that I've been so privileged to learn by people like Ruth and people like Sylvia Poero, who is my like reparenting person, like brought me in very early on as a new mama and started giving me language around the inner child and giving me language around remothering myself, right? So I think all of those pieces together is what the philosophy is, and it's not prescriptive in any way, right? I think that the most prescriptive thing is like all behavior is a strategy to me, like, because that's really what I have found to be true whenever we have the conversation around like what is the need, what is the actual need, like you kind of do away with all of this, like, the judgment and the labeling of behaviors and things like that, and you can really start to look at how to get those needs met for ourselves, how to support our children in getting them, met for them. It's just a very compassionate and I don't know, just more gentle framework than some other parenting frameworks that I've seen out there.
Well, that's an understatement.
A little bit. I know. I was talking to my friend who was raised on like Dobson, right? Like her parents did. I think that was the guy's last name. He was like a super conservative, like parenting author, and like told parents forever to hit their kids and to do these like horrible punishments. And she was sharing with me, and I was just like that's so terrifying.
Right, and that's the way it's been for a long time. And
Yeah.
now it's kind of watered down into gentle parenting.
Mhm.
I mean, well, it's progressing. It's progressing to gentle parenting, but then gentle parenting still has a lot of those underpinnings, but now it's all wrapped up nice and it looks prettier.
I think that I think especially coming from like this world of like Latino social media content, also like so much like in my culture, it is so normalized that we hit our kids. Like it is the expectation that that is how you discipline them. And for a long time, I felt like I didn't want to tell my family that wasn't planning on spanking my kids. Like, because that would be stigmatized almost like, oh, you're going to raise them wrong, right? You're to raise them to be malcriado. Malcriado in Spanish means misbehaved, but it literally means poorly raised. It's the equivalent of, and so there's a lot of, because we're so much of a collectivist culture, there's a lot of what the Western psychologists would call like enmeshment of like who you are as a reflection of like, it's just a little bit more tangled, I think, for the parents, where it's really important for us to be able to raise kids who are respectful, because there was historically many consequences for Native children, Mexican children that were not seen as respectful. And I think that the Black community definitely like has similar like history that has led to a lot of the parenting practices that we see, which is why people like, Yolanda Williams of Parenting Decolonized and Trina Green Brown of Parenting for Liberation, and people who work specifically with the Black community are doing such incredible, amazing, like important work to talk about where some of these things came from. Because my introduction to attachment parenting wasn't even any remotely like near how my family experienced parenting, right? And so when I started looking at Dan Siegel, and I started reading, Parenting from the Inside Out, and Laura Markham's books and Janet Lansbury's books, and like all of these. At the time, I was like, like this is really powerful and new and like so exciting, and the brain science and all these things, and I was so overjoyed to like have found them. And then over time, I started realizing that that was actually what had been taken away from my ancestors by colonization. That it was very interesting to me when I would enter spaces where attachment parenting and gentle parenting was the conversation. They were usually white spaces. Homeschool spaces are usually white spaces, more privileged spaces. And so I asked myself, like, why is it that the people in my community in Santana, which is 78% Latino, mostly Mexican American, why is it that that is not what has been normalized for us? Why is it that so many of us are recovering from so much trauma that our parents were not able to prevent because they didn't have the resources, the tools, the reflection, the privilege, the ability to get down on our level, to empathize with us, and to do what all these amazing white parenting authors suggest that we do. But we need to have the collective healing first. And in order for the collective healing to happen, we need to stop the oppression that is continuing on these families. And so I lose my hair sometimes because I'm just like, it doesn't seem just, right? And so I think that the work that I'm doing is about justice for Latino families and for people who have experienced so much violence and so much marginalization and exploitation in our lineages. That's not where my focus is on like, trying to say, hey, look how oppressed we are. No, my focus is on saying we have a right to live in ways that are balanced and that is healthy for both parent and child, right? And so that's what my focus is, just like moving more towards that, but still healing this part, right? Still healing the part that has the wounds, and doing that through parenting, I think, is like such a beautiful way to honor lineage, right? And such a beautiful gift to not just like our own children, but our descendants. So.
We talked about the underlying need of the child, but there's also the underlying need of the parent.
Right.
And the more you get into helping parents, the more you realize you have to help the parents. I'm a therapist, I'm a trauma therapist, so and trying to explain to parents like actually your healing is paramount, and how to actually convince and get the buy-in that it's important. You're not going to be able to just control your kids. That's not going to work out. The whole thing. And I'm just curious how the pushback goes with your work, your facilitation.
Yeah. Actually, it's funny because when like they don't know what to expect. Like I'll come in with a presentation called Ending Chancla Culture, and all they've heard is just like chancla and how funny that is. Right. And so I'm coming into communities that like also see that as something that is very much a part of our culture. And so I have to approach it so delicately because I never want to diminish the fact that laughing at those things does meet a need for us, right? Like humor is such a beautiful coping strategy for, I think, especially the Latino community. I guess I'm biased because that's where I come from. And I just think that we're funny people. Like we pride ourselves, right, in being able to laugh about things. But I think that has been such a solid like coping strategy for us. And my invitation to people is to really start thinking a little bit deeper about what we laugh about. And whether that's something that we're laughing about because it's truly funny, or we're laughing because we're coping. And so then we go a little bit deeper. We say, okay, well, what are we coping with, right? What are some of the things that we're coping with? And so by the end of those experiences, and I do think that they're experiences, right? Sitting in a space with people for 2.5 hours and really like going in becomes this really beautiful, like, and revelatory. It becomes very revealing, like, oh, we have so much more to heal. And it's not about what you do, it's about who you are when you're with your children, right? And how rooted you can stay and how graceful you can be when you're human and you make mistakes. And so I always tell them, like, it's not an expectation ever that we parent perfectly. It's not possible. I don't know anybody that's ever parented perfectly. But there are ways to parent in respectful ways, right? Ways that are honoring of our humanity. And that is sometimes new for a lot of these communities to hear. There are definitely people who have said, like, I've never heard that my needs matter. Like, I've been told that. Like, no one has ever said to me that my needs matter and that I'm not bad. I had a young Latino man tell me that once. I used to work at transitional living homes, and he was there. Instead of being in juvenile hall, he ended up opting to go into this home, and he was taking my parenting class because back in the day, I worked at nonprofits where I would run these parenting classes constantly. I was running like 7 to 9 parenting classes sometimes a week. And so we would have these beautiful circles, and sometimes they would say things like that. They would say, I've never heard. And it's so simple. It's like, hey, your needs matter. Hey, you're not a bad person. Hey, something was done to you and it threw you off kilter. And hey, trauma is real, right? And hey, this is what it does to your brain. And hey, you're just giving context. And so I just find that the ability to give context to parents about what their experiences are really is what like shifts something. It really just kind of there, you can kind of like sense this click that happens. And you just hold the silence, afterwards of it. And it's just so beautiful. Like, I love being able to do my work. Like, I think that's really the message this year for me, is just like, I love being able to to hold that space, and to hold that silence and to allow for that journey and to be a part of their journey, and they're like, thank you. And I'm like, no, like, I'm not there when you're in it, right? Like, I come here and I'm doing my thing for a couple hours and then I leave, and then you have to integrate, and then you have to do that work. And so I'm like, I'm celebrating you because I know how hard it is for me, and I teach this stuff. Like, and so for you, like, I just, I just want you to feel supported. I want you to feel held for a little bit, so that's then what your children can feel from you. And so it just becomes this very reciprocal relationship, I think, between myself and these parents. I think that it helps the foundation that they're wanting to lay for them and their children.
That's so amazing because you're really coming at it from like a connected angle. The way that you model sort of the whole philosophy for the parents is also the way that you deliver the message. And I bet that that's a felt sense by those parents, that they feel connected to you and seen by you and that they feel empowered. So there's no shame and there's no wrongness and judgment. It's like, here I am with lived experience too also. And, I want to make sure that you feel like you can do this too. Like, we're in this together. That's so beautiful. That must be such an incredible feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, it's like the best high.
Yeah.
Like, I used to get really high, but this is a much, much better
Right.
high than that. It's just really special. Like, I just, and I think that is really, when we talk about like these bigger issues that we're seeing in the world, like, I feel like that is really where I'm kind of carving out like a little bit of resistance, right? Because I really feel like once people start recognizing that they have needs and that they matter and that they are sacred and that they have, gifts to be able to offer to the collective and to the community, once that is, in movement, in motion, you start looking around and seeing things differently, right? You start realizing how fucked up this has been, right? And that's a process of holding a lot of grief as well. And I feel like part of the reason that I'm able to kind of speak on some of these greater issues is because I've had the practice of being able to hold grief, right? I understand sometimes when people are like, I can't hold it because I've never been able to hold grief and I don't know what to do with it. And it hurts me. And I don't like being hurt because I'm so used to being comfortable. And I don't know. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm very used to being uncomfortable. And very used to like, I'm not desensitized to it by any means, but I feel like if I can hold it, I have to hold it. Right. Like and I do feel like we have to be able to to hold not only like what my people experienced, right? Because that's a lot to hold. Like even just in my family, even just in my lineage, even just in childhood, like there's a lot there that I feel the weight of, right? But then to open ourselves up to these other families and these other children and these other lineages and recognize that we're the same, right? There's this beautiful Mayan, it's not a verse, it's more of a saying. It's just in la quech, and in la quech means tú eres mi otro yo, which means you are my other me. It's like namaste kind of, right? But I have it tattooed because I'm like, that is really like what it is. It's like we have to be interlocked in order to be able to see something different. And I still believe in something different. Like I see it in our kids, the youth are very on fire right now, just with how they're showing up. And that's part of, I think, my message as well, is like, you have to look at them, like turn to them, right? Like kids are just such teachers. And I think our youth are just so valuable, and I see that in my 13-year-old right now. And I'm just like, oh my God, you're so much cooler than me. Like she's like already a super feminist. And I'm like, whoa, like I didn't get there until I was, this age. And so I'm very inspired by them for sure.
Well, that's a good transition to, I want to ask you, how's it going? Like, how's it going with your kids and you?
My daughter recently got TikTok. So it's been interesting and actually very reassuring to me, like where her algorithm has led her. She's very open and very transparent with me about the things that she's exposed to. And so we're able to watch a lot of stuff together and talk about it, which I really love and I really find valuable. And I feel that the investment that I've made in having a trusting relationship with her, like I see that paying off in this experience, right? Where we're able to have really open conversations. She's already thinking with a critical lens, unfortunately, where we homeschool her. And so in her enrichment space, it's very MAGA. Like it's very like Christian homeschool is the dominant form of homeschooling. Like that's really what you see. And so we've had to have, by necessity, a lot of conversations around how to feel safe in that environment.
Right.
She's half white, right? So she has a lot of, and I'm a white Latina. Like if you look at me, I'm not, you wouldn't immediately think that I have like indigenous lineage. I look more European, like my dad. And her dad is like fully, European. And so she comes with a lot of privilege, but also a lot of connection to my family, right? My lineage. And so from very young, I've exposed her to different people have different experiences, right? And some people have it much harder than you do. And we live in an area where there's a lot of poverty and we see it all the time. And so we've been able to, I think, throughout her life, engage in these discussions. And so now that she is being exposed to the greater discussions, she knows who Luigi Mangione is. She knows what he did. She knows, she knows some of the things that this current president is saying and some of the threats that people in her family are under when it comes to deportation. And I think we have a very healthy way of engaging about these things. She also is very familiar with my work, right? Like we've been able to understand the greater context and, hey, this is history, right? And this is what your family went through. And this is what you're a part of. And you're a part of this like amazing lineage of women who are like fighters and survivors. And so I weave, I think, a lot of what we're seeing into what her role is in creating some kind of shift also, right? And so people, I think, who are on another side might look at the conversations that she and I have and say like, this is indoctrination or whatever. And I'm like, no, really, it's just me teaching my child how to be an empathetic human being. And even just raising children to be empathetic about the plight of other people's is a form of resistance. And I want more people to be aware of that, as long as you're connecting it to this collective as well, right? Because I feel like there's a lot of parenting modalities where the focus is more individualistic.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like you just have to, there's like the self-driven child and things like that, where it's like, okay, we want to like make sure that these kids like grow up and they're really successful and they're really these things. And so I think that what gets lost in that is this other piece that like, actually we should be raising them to see themselves as responsible for one another, being able to take care of one another. And so I don't have qualms about that, right? Despite any criticism that might come in, even from her dad's side of the family, who are Trump supporters. And so that's been another like interesting point of conversation for us. But that's confusing for kids, right? Who have been raised to really understand how wrong some of these things are. And so a lot of it has been kind of like processing the frustration that she feels, the rage that she feels. She's very loud. And so we've had to give her, I've had to give her a lot of space to just rage, just like, okay, let's be mad about it. Like, let's cuss when we're talking about it. Like, and so I want to be able to offer her like a healthy model of how to digest that rage, because she's a woman, like she's growing into becoming a woman. And that is, we are still in a patriarchal society. And so she's going to experience, some of the things that I think all of us have experienced in a patriarchal society, and being second class to, the white male ideal of existing. And so it's been a lot of just kind of entering into how to be a complex human, like how to hold all of this complexity. And I feel lucky, like I just feel lucky to be able to be with her in that. And my younger ones too, who, are also similarly being exposed to the books that she and I read when we were younger, and the conversations. And fortunately, we live in a very brown city. And so they are kind of outliers when we go to the park, and every other child is a Spanish speaking, like brown child. And, they're like, oh, shoot, like I have to work on my Spanish because I want to play with these kids.
You said, I'm so glad I invested in this trust with my daughter. What does that mean?
I think parenting the way that I have parented has not been easy. I think I've had to show a lot of restraint. Otherwise, I would be slipping into a lot of the behaviors that I grew up with, right? And so I think the investment in developing trust is a divestment in the violence. And so it's more, I'm pouring in a lot of trust, like my trust for myself too, even if people told me, throughout her childhood that she needed to be spanked, or that she was too loud, too handsy, whatever it was, that I heard from other people, and that, this is how she needs to be corrected, right? Mostly from like older generations in my family. But I think saying no to that, and saying, no, I'm actually going to like invest a lot of love and trust in myself, in being able to like raise her in a way that I feel is more honoring of both of us, right? And I feel like that really has been so fruitful. It's not so much investing, it's more like I planted these seeds, right? And I nurtured them, and I made sure they got enough sunlight, and I made sure that they got enough water. And I just feel like that was like tending to that evolution has been really powerful.
Did you have an awakening? Like, did you have your first baby, and you're like, oh my God, I cannot do it the way that it was done? Like, how did you wake up to this perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate that I went to school for child development. So when I graduated high school, I was really interested in psychology. So I started psychology. I did 6.5 years of community college, and I did like the entire early childhood.
Wow.
So I have an AA in early childhood, and then I transferred and I got a BA in child development and family studies, and I double majored in family life education. So this is all kind of like before and then a little bit into when I became a mama. So I transferred to university while I was pregnant with her. And so I was like pumping in the bathroom, like my classes. So what I realized actually was that a lot of what we know from the parenting books isn't even present in university. Like it's what's, I would ask my teacher, like, do you know about Dan Siegel? Do you know about Gabor Mate? Like, do you know about all of these people that I'm learning about? And they're like, no, they're still doing, Piaget and Vygotsky theory and like all of these. I'm like, that's fine, but there's more now. Like we can, yeah, yeah. And so I think I did have a moment though where right after, so I gave birth to her at home. And to my third. My second was a planned home birth, but I ended up getting transferred to the hospital, thankfully, because it was like 32 hours of labor and it was a lot. But from the time that I learned about birthing at home and just kind of knowing that, my grandmother had had 12 children at home and my other grandmother had had 10 children at home. And so I was like, I'm pretty sure I can do this. Like, I'm pretty sure that, and they're my grandmothers. I'm like, that was pretty recent. Like, I think I can actually do this. And I ended up giving birth to her in my bed. And I really did have that moment where I looked at her and I was just like, I can't imagine ever harming this child. And this child is me, and I never deserved either. And so that was really the moment where I saw myself in her, not in like a egoic way, right? I wasn't like, oh, you're me, and I'm like all my unfulfilled dreams will come through you. Like that was not. It was really just a special moment of like recognizing her sacredness and my sacredness simultaneously. And I think from then I just kind of recognized like that we don't deserve violence, like no one deserves violence. And many of us have convinced ourselves, actually we've been convinced, I think, by systems. And we've just kind of, attached to that message that we're not sacred, right? That we don't matter much. That we're not that important, right? And so yeah, I think parenting has been definitely, or becoming a mother has been the catalyst for a lot of my work, obviously. And whenever I share about my children, I say they really are like my greatest teachers, as apart from all these other wonderful teachers that I may share or mention. My children are constantly humbling me, constantly, and now roasting me for my 13-year-old. Now just outright roasting me. Like,
I have a teenager who roasts me. A 13-year-old also, by the
yeah.
way.
Oh, so
Yeah, I mean, I always say like you get on this path and then your child will show you how to stay on the path. Because now when I go off the path, she's like, "What are you doing?" She has even said to me, "We're a collaborative family. What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, can you just for this one time just do what I say? Like just this once? Since I know so much more than you." But like, nope, nope, that's not what we're doing here.
No, she calls me out quite a bit. I think all of my kids, like I will let them call me out whenever they feel like they need to call me out, because I do need to get called out sometimes, right? Like, mom, you're not paying attention to me, like get off your phone. And I'm just like, oh my God, like you're right, off my phone. Or she'll say, my oldest will be really cheeky and just say, like, oh, is this what you teach your parents? Like the parents, like she knows what I do, so she uses it against
My
me.
daughter does the same exact thing.
Yeah.
She goes, "Oh, do your followers know
Yeah.
those things to me?" And I'll be like, "Oh," and she'll go, "Wait, I got to get my video," stuff like that.
Yeah. No, but I'm like, go ahead. I'm like, I do share. Like, that is luckily for me, like, my journey has always been transparent. So when I fuck up, yeah, I fucked up, and
Right.
all that too. So it's like, you can't get me, girl.
Yeah, well, the coolest thing about having that perspective is that like that's your kid giving you feedback, so then you adjust. And
Yeah.
so, when we're thinking about teachers, like that's what it is that like I'm constantly like learning from you. I'm actually here for that and I'm taking it in as feedback, not as like a somebody that I have to beat into submission, with my power over. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's so cool that our kids, feel that. I only have an almost 3-year-old, but I still feel similarly. Like she'll call me in all the time and she'll be like, "I need attention." Like, no, because I said no, stop. Don't do that. Don't talk to me like that, and it's like It's amazing that we're actually here for it.
Yeah, it really is. It's so much to celebrate. Like
Yeah.
I really just want like for parents to celebrate like how many cycles we're breaking.
Mm-hmm.
So especially for the parents that I work with, I'm just like, you're sitting here. Like that's a big deal that you're sitting
Mm.
here, like wanting to talk about parenting and your kids. Like that's not something that we had blueprint for really. And when with our parents and earlier generations. So yeah, there's so much to celebrate and like being able to create that relationship is really beautiful.
I bet when you listen to this podcast, you're thinking, oh my gosh, I wish I could call Rathia Lee. Because that's why I reached out to her in the first place. I was a fan of Rathia's. I watched her TikToks. I wrote her. I said, look, we are going to need to collaborate because I love you and I'm in love with you. And I bet if you're listening to this, you're like, I want Rathia's guidance. I want to directly talk to Rathia too. Well, you can, and you should, because Rathia actually offers 30-minute support sessions with people who need input on stuck places in their parenting. And I can tell you as her friend, I use her all the time via voice notes. And I want you to know that so can you. You just need to go to the link in our show notes to book a mentoring session with Rathia. She offers 30-minute sessions for parents, and she also has a weekly session open at a reduced rate for low-income and BIPOC individuals. So if you could use some of Rathia's clear, confident, loving, connected, supportive, and brilliant advice, then you need to head over to calendly.com/Rathia or rathia.com, and those links will be in the show notes.
I don't know if you think of it this way, but like a lot of times therapy is kind of like a white construct as far as I know. It's like it can be.
Mm-hmm.
So like for people like the getting into therapy is not really they're not going to be that's not the step. How do parents, you know, I don't know if you do ongoing work with these families or you just introduce this whole idea and then you go, okay, go learn about it. Like, what is the process?
So it depends. I think there's so much value to being able to stay with a group for like a long-term
Okay.
process. I have been in like 2-year long cohorts with families that by the end of it we did like this all-day retreat and it was really like special to see everyone. It was a virtual 2-year engagement that was through a partnership that we had with an organization in LA. And then there are times where I just come and introduce it, right? And I have become, I think, pretty skilled, I hope, at like opening a circle and knowing how to close it, right? Because a lot of times when you're talking trauma, inner child work, like there's like an opening that happens. And I think in the past, I wasn't like, I would want to get so much in um, that I wasn't necessarily closing the circle the way that was the most intentional, right? And so now it's really like a slower process. And sometimes I don't even like use the slides, right? Because I'm like, this is just like, context. You can read this later. Like, let's just really start to integrate like while we're here. And yeah, so it's like I'm able to introduce it, but it's still going to like go in really deep, I hope. Right, like I hope that it kind of like tugs at something and then that you can kind of like follow that sensation after this, because again, like I'm not really gonna be there and I don't do individual coaching and I don't do therapy and I'm not a therapist, right? I'm not a therapist. I'm just somebody who you know knew that I needed to heal very early uh, and started just really going in that direction of understanding what I needed to understand to just be well in myself, right? And and I was just constantly talking in school, so I just still am constantly talking, like talking. Yeah,
That's your superpower.
I guess.
It feels that way to me. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's your communication is your power right now.
Yeah. I'm trying to find the modality. I think we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, right? Just how really a lot of the message was built like in Instagram. Like that's really been the space where we've had these conversations outside of those like in-person circles. Because when I'm doing the in-person, that's really like Spanish speaking community members who don't necessarily have Instagram. Or that's not like where they're going to have their conversations. Like there's a very different demographic when you think of
Right.
your Instagram followers versus the people that you're working with in community um, in my city or in other cities, right? And so I want depth. Like I'm good on the like the number of followers, nice, fine, whatever. I don't want to have superficial and redundant conversations over and over because followers find you and don't know that there's been 6 years worth of work and nuance that and foundation that you have laid. And the demands in those spaces feel very high of content creators. And I get that, right? Like I've also made demands of content creators, and I'm just like, hey, this is your, you have 4 million people on your platform. Like might want to say something and but for me I think yeah, so I know that you get with the I know that you probably like I've seen my rage posts where I'm just like, why have you not said anything?
I love your rage posts.
I do well in my rage.
Yeah.
I really relate to what you're saying about like the depth too, because I'm not a content creator and I never want to be. I'm on this podcast and I joined with Rathia and I was like, I'm gonna piggyback off of like, your name and face because I love this philosophy that we talk about on here. And, I'm a family therapist, but I don't want to ever sort of like have to choose between like I think it's hard to like want to really have nuanced conversations on like what it means to like decolonize our parenting and like collaborate with like children who are young and children who are very new, even infants. Like this is stuff that takes like real nuance and depth, and
Yes.
to do that work with folks who are like low income, who can't just scroll on Instagram and like pick their different like accounts that they want and don't have the time and the resources. Like that is where you actually can really make a shift, because people, the vast majority of folks are on like the traditional parenting paradigm, gentle parenting accounts that are like the big, the Dr. Becky's and the big ones, right? And those aren't the places where you're going to get that depth, like that unpacking and that like power conversation.
Yeah.
Must
Yeah.
be so hard for you guys to like try to put out that message in that space. Like I can't, I don't want to touch it. I like I post a little bit here and there, but I think it must be really really exhausting.
I think Ruthia does a great job. And I think like it's all through just very earnest, like reflection, right? Like it's all just, I really feel like the platform was just like built on me processing my story. It's just like, hey, this reminded me of like this reality of my life, hey. And it was mainly like um tweet post as like prompt for my writing, right? And it was just like, okay, here's the tweet post. And then I would like micro blog and then caption. And people just really over the years have said like I really appreciate the sharing, just the transparency. And so I want to get back to that. I don't know that Instagram is the space for that, right? I don't know that because now I do feel a responsibility to use my platform to showcase and to highlight so much of what's not being shared in other spaces. And but it's a little bit of a pull, right? Because I do obviously want to like continue connecting with the community there. And also like I want depth. Uh, and that can come through my writing. I just finished writing a book in December and that's going to get published in September 26th. And so I'm excited for that. The book is called Chancla, which means sandal, right? It's about like all these dynamics. Um, some of these stories that I've shared on this podcast, I think will probably show up in the book as well. But I want the depth and I really want to know that, there's a world outside of Instagram. And we had our meeting, my team and I had our meeting earlier and I'm like, I really am craving like more in person,
Hmm.
getting, the workshops that we're hosting. Sometimes we get 200 people to sign up and sometimes we get 5 and sometimes we, what I mean? Like it just depends. And we're being playful a little bit about it and just kind of seeing, okay, well, if this doesn't feel good, and that's another part of like, becoming as integrated as I've like worked to try to be is like really being able to like attune to what feels good and like not
Mhm.
do things just because they're, the lucrative or like the smart, thing to do. It's like if it doesn't feel good, there's a good reason why it feel good and it's not the thing to do, right? And then some things like are more slow to warm. I'm starting like a Substack and I'm like, okay, like
Mhm.
I've had some writing done in there, but I haven't published anything. I'm like, I just know that like I'm gonna feel it one moment and then I'm gonna be like, boom,
Mhm.
publish.
Mhm.
Everyone go follow, it's all there. But that hasn't happened yet because I'm moving, I'm still moving slow. There's a lot of stuff happening in my family and the parenting. I homeschool. Like there's quite a bit. So I got this tattoo, I don't know,
Oh,
a couple years ago when things started moving really fast. And I was like,
Oh, it's a snail?
it's a snail.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool.
Neil is saying slow down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's gorgeous.
Yeah.
I want to just live slower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm very focused on that right now.
Yeah. That's what we say that all the time, especially with our work. Like our podcast is small. It's a small podcast and we sometimes get caught in that like pressure of like, oh, we should have more people. We want to get the message out there, but
Yeah.
we're always reminding each other like we just have to trust the process. We just have to go slow with it. We got to figure out what our needs are, what our intuition is telling us and really work intentionally.
Also, we're obsessed with the topic. So, like, even
Mhm.
when we're not recording, we are constantly leaving each other messages. We're obsessed. We're like literally obsessed. And we didn't even know each other before this podcast, and now we're like best
Mm.
buddies. It's crazy.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
It's
you.
beautiful. It's like one of those magical experiences. So, like, it's great to have it recorded, but it's also just what we're living and breathing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So much passion about it.
And we get to meet we get to meet you, Leslie, and we get to meet all of these amazing people like Yolanda and Iris Chen. And like, it's just so incredible to feel united, like in all of our different places throughout the world with this one mission. It's just like, it's so deeply healing.
Oh my gosh. I love Iris. Iris and I and Yolanda and I have been friends since I started the platform like back in 2018. So
They're the best.
we've gone through collaborations, like all kinds of really fun stuff that we've done together. And I'm just like always like in awe
I
of
know.
and what they're doing and the alignment. I'm just like
Yeah.
we're like Power Rangers or something.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
Isn't it wild too? Like there's really different languaging about it. Like
Mm.
your whole languaging seems really different than the ones I've been using, which I'm hungry for because I also get tired of the same words. They lose their power after a while.
yeah.
Loved hearing you today. I just felt very much like it was like drinking water for me.
Hmm.
Thank you. I love that. This is another thing that you don't realize is that when you start talking about this stuff all the time, and then you enter a space and you start talking about it with people that don't talk about it all the time, you very quickly realize that you have to really broach those subjects with a lot of slowness,
Yeah. Yeah.
intentionality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it can be really challenging and almost like it can be damaging actually to relationships when, like I've had people sort of, you know how it is when people defend their histories and, their parents' behaviors and the decisions that they make as parents and I turned out fine and my kids are fine. It's very it can be really difficult. So you have to proceed kind of slowly and gently.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share with people before we end? Is there anything particular you want to share?
I think I just want to encourage folks to stay in the celebration, like just stay in the joy as much as we can, and to learn what balance looks like for us and recognize that it's not ever a solid state of being, it's more of a striving that we're doing. And so, I hope that people will invoke like a lot of gentleness in that process and feel free to play in it. And yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like when we start having conversations around, what healing looks like, we we can get stuck in like a lot of like the murk, right? Like I'm not healing fast enough. I'm not like, over this. I need to get through. And like I'm still coping with like several traumas. I'm still in therapy, right? Like I don't think I'll ever stop going to therapy. My therapist is amazing. She's been with me for 8 years. And so I will always encourage people to find continuous support and people that you can just say anything to, right? That won't judge you.
Yeah, and support, like figuring out what support you need to come back to the joy if you're not able to find it. If you can't find it, if you're underground, you to ask the question, what would I need? Like you said, the underlying need. What would I need to be able to come back to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So where do people find you?
Instagram is a good place to kind of see what is happening in my brain and in, our workshops and things like that. But I think I really want to encourage people to move to subscribe to our newsletter, which we don't send out a lot of. That can be found at latinxparenting.org, latinxparenting.org.
So it's so amazing to meet you, Leslie. Is just, so beautiful to hear everything that you do with all of these families. It's so inspiring.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Leslie. We'll be in touch again.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye. This has been Your Kids Don't Suck. You can find me, Kara Tedstone, at www.karatedstonetherapy.com and on Instagram at Kara Tedstone Therapy. On my website, you'll find links to recommended readings and a link to my Reparenting with Mindfulness workbook, available now on Amazon.
You can find me, Rathia Lee, at www.rathia.com. That's RYTHEA.com. There you'll find published books, articles, and music, and parenting videos. Also, I'm on TikTok at Rathia Lee, on Instagram at Rathia Lee. You can book parent mentoring sessions with me through my website. And also I have an Advice from a Loving Bitch YouTube show that helps people heal self-hatred, and that's rathia.com/advice. It is important and essential to put our voices, Rathia and Kara, in a context. We are two white, cisgendered, straight, middle-class women living with financial and societal privilege. Because of this, our perspectives are limited and do not reflect the realities of all of our listeners. This podcast will feature guests with expertise around conscious parenting who differ in race, class, abilities, sexual orientation, and histories from us, to broaden the conversation and reflect the lives of as many people as possible. 25% of the proceeds of this podcast will go to creators of color who have been mentors and influences on our work and in our growth as parents.
If you like our show, please subscribe and stay tuned for more conscious parenting advice and insights. And check out our link tree at linktr.ee/yourkidsdon'tsuck to donate and connect with us.